Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unmasking Motherhood. I am joined here today by a dear friend, Monica, who I will introduce to you in just a minute. For those of you that are new to the podcast, I want to share a little bit about the heart of the podcast. This podcast is for mothers or women considering motherhood. And so often in life, we go throughout our days feeling disconnected to ourselves and the world around us and other humans. And deep down, we all crave connection, to be seen, to belong, and to not feel alone. So, the heart of this podcast is it's a storytelling podcast where you get to journey with women from all walks of life and all stages of motherhood, which I personally love, and just to hear their story, to hear the highs, the lows, whatever they're called to share, and everything in between, so that in turn you feel less alone and maybe more connected to you or a dear friend you love or your own mother through what they share in their story. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation today. I want to introduce to you my friend Monica. We were talking right before the podcast and like, when did we meet? How did we meet? Like, it just feels like I've known you. It just felt like really divine and beautiful. And I think it was just on Instagram is what we decided back in 2019. So yeah, Monica is a beautiful human and a mama. Where are you located again, Monica, in the
I'm in
Midwest?
Kansas City.
City, right. So I'm really grateful to have you on to talk about your mothering journey, just more about you. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes. So we're going to jump into part one of the podcast where we're going to hear more about Monica's background, but like the mask side, hence the name Unmasking Motherhood. And then part two is where we go a little deeper, right? So I want to just start with this question for you, Monica. If someone that didn't know you was just like observing your life from the outside right now, what would they notice about your life? And I'm talking like, share whatever you feel comfortable with from socioeconomic background, where you live, um, kids, family vibe, what you do for hobbies, just anything that's more like superficial of like, oh, they think this about me. And even down
Yeah.
to like what they might think about you, like she's outgoing or she has it all together or she's a hot mess. Like, what would an observer that doesn't even know you just think from the outside about your life and about you?
Fun question. Okay.
Right.
So they would definitely observe the fact that I have two children. I have a son who's 16 years old and a daughter who is 20, and she lives in Myrtle Beach. And my son lives here with us in Kansas City. I have a partner, a couple of dogs, and I live in suburban area. And my guess is people would make the assumption that I have like all my stuff together. Um, that I've got it mostly figured out. Um, that I've probably had a pretty easy journey getting there. um, and there's lots of reasons why they would think that, but we'll get into those later, I'm sure. Let's see if there's anything else that feels relevant. They would probably make the assumption that I'm a therapist too,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
only like halfway right. So, um,
Uh,
yeah, I would say soccer mom vibes because my son's very active in soccer. So I've got soccer mom. Uh,
I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. I've actually been a soccer mom most of my mothering life. So yeah, my daughter's played since she was 4. So and she's 20 now. So
Wow.
16 years of soccer mom life. So there's lots of assumptions I'm sure to be made about that.
Right. Absolutely.
Um,
Come on here.
but yeah, I'm kind of a homebody these days, and I think most people would kind of notice that too. So
Mhm.
maybe assume I've been that my whole life,
Ah,
which would
yeah.
be very false.
Yep. What they would see on the outside isn't always the true picture. It's so
Yeah.
interesting to me. Sometimes we think we know and we're like, oh,
Hmm.
mouth later or
Hmm.
something. What about, is there anything else you would add about your personality? Like someone that's just like observing you, what they might think about who you are and how you go about life?
Yeah, thanks for asking deeper. Um, Pretty reserved, I would say. Um, private.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. There's probably another word that it's failing me though. Just that like energy of like having it like a put together life.
Yeah. Mhm. It's cookie cutter, like everything's great from the outside,
Yeah, yeah. I think that would be what most people would.
desirable, or it might even be something people are envious of, like, I wish I had that. Maybe.
Yes, actually, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Another part of your background, keeping it again more superficial,
Sure.
take us back to just your story of origin, thinking about the family dynamic that you grew up in, and anything you're comfortable, willing to share about economic background, if you were raised in religion, just educational pieces, whether it's if you went to college, elementary, anything of note. But again, keeping it as surface level as possible, of
Okay.
like if someone was to see the way you grew up, what would they have noticed about your life? And feel free to even mention your partner if that feels appropriate, of like how you met, if that
Okay.
feels a part of your story. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I grew up in a very small town in Northeast Missouri. There were probably about 2,000 people in the town where I grew up. And so more cows than people is what I usually joke. No stoplight until like adult life times. So
Oh my God.
you can imagine like maybe you can't, but everyone knows everyone's business. And so there's not a lot of like privacy given in small town. It's not uncommon for people to see me not wave at them in town and then tell my parents about it.
Oh my
I was a really good student and an athlete, and that became a big part of my identity during that time. Played basketball and track, and I was in track and did softball for a while too. So lots of sports, lots of emphasis on athletics and performance in that way, and also a lot of emphasis on getting straight A's in school.
God. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I I think I started dating like, oh gosh, I remember having boyfriends through elementary school. So, um, but
Great
also just
moment.
remember remember that just being a really big part of like my world was looking for another person to offer me love and admiration, I think is a good word. That was lacking a bit in my home life, I would say, especially from my father. So it makes sense to me that, I was looking for that elsewhere because home life felt chaotic and stressful and tumultuous. Um, we grew up, I didn't know how poor I was until I left my hometown and came back as an adult and saw it through new eyes. And so I grew up very, very poor to a point of like definitely should have been on government assistance, but there was a pride issue there for my family. And so we just struggled even more because of that. Um, which now seeing, I didn't really touch much on socioeconomic currently, but we're very comfortable middle class currently. So I think, yeah, definitely connect some dots to people assuming I've always had a comfortable life, but that is most definitely not the case. My house was like falling apart, honestly, when I was growing up. It was embarrassing to have friends over. So, yeah. I left my hometown as soon as I could. When I graduated high school at 18, I left and went to college in Kansas City to a small private Catholic school. I was raised Methodist, and religion was a big part of my upbringing. My mom was Sunday school teacher. Um, I was active in youth group. So yeah, there's a lot of focus and orienting around religion in my childhood as well.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel like a complete enough picture?
Yes.
Okay.
Curious when you met your partner. I would say, if
Okay.
anything, add, yeah.
Yeah. yeah, I'm happy to share that.
And so
Only in
also share motherhood, like when you met your partner and then
yeah,
what age you became a mom. Kind of curious
yeah.
about that too. Yeah.
Okay. So my current partner and I have been together 10 years. So I met my ex-husband when I was in my last semester in college. And back to that high achieving thing, I managed to get my undergrad completed in 3 years with loads of stress, and I would never recommend it to anyone. But that was the way I was just programmed to operate. So I met him when I was only 21 years old, and we had dated for a while. And I unintentionally got pregnant. And I've thought a lot about how if I hadn't, I'm not sure our relationship would have went much further after the weeks after finding out. So I did not get married to him right away. We chose to kind of wait and see how our relationship evolved over the next couple of years. But by the time my daughter was just less than 2 years old, we did get married and lived in Kansas City together. And then I had my son 4 years later. So they're 4 years apart. And there was, we were together 9 years. And then divorced, and I met my current partner a couple of years after that via a dating site. So
Yes.
back when they were still like only sites and not apps, so it's still a little like taboo, it feels like, to be
Mhm.
like, whereas now people like openly admit all the dating app, like, adventures and stuff. It was still
Yeah,
a little bit taboo at the time when we met a little over about 10 and a half years ago.
sure. I love hearing a good success story because I often
Yeah, I
hear
know.
the horror stories of
I
online
know.
dating and apps, and I'm like, oh, yay.
I know. Let my story be hope and inspiration that it is possible to make connections with people that way. You just
Mhm.
have to trust your instincts and follow your heart. So, yeah, that's how we met. And we have been together. Yeah, we just celebrated 10 years together earlier this year.
Holy cow, incredible.
Yeah.
Congrats to
Yeah.
both.
Thank you. So it is actually the relationship I'm in now is the longest relationship I'd ever been in.
Yeah,
So
okay.
longer than even my marriage.
Hmm, beautiful. Before I move us on, I wanted to just check in if there's anything else that feels important to share about that just timeline of life of like, oh, people would have noticed this just in my upbringing and
Hmm. The thing that feels like I want to share is that, that with my first pregnancy being unplanned, that there was a lot of, and being unmarried, there was just a lot of um, fear of judgment and feeling like I had failed at my life, and just a lot of shame
hmm,
from that part of my journey. And I know you want to go deeper later, so I'll leave it at that. Just that um, some of it feels real, and some of it feels like I was probably playing that up in my mind more than maybe actually was true. But the way that my news was received by my family specifically was not especially um, positive at first. So just want to paint a little more of that picture too.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a feeling that at least one of the moms listening is going to have someone they know in their life who can very much relate, if not
Yeah.
themselves. There's just something about being able to say, me too. Oh, when another woman has a similar experience, whether it's like deep or not, that you're like, you can just breathe a little more deeply. Sometimes they just needed to hear the same struggle.
Yeah.
Background story of I grew up in a small town too, and I always felt la la la, so
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
And I didn't really have it. I could add, like, I didn't really have anyone um, close to me that was going through something similar at that time. Felt very isolating.
Oh,
to
yeah.
have messed up my life that way. So,
And remind me, I know you touched on this, like motherhood,
mhm.
maybe not, you weren't planning then, but were you were hoping to be a mother at some point?
That's a great question. I love that. And I'm not someone who had lots of like plans for my mothering journey. I'm not someone who dreamed of having children one day necessarily. It wasn't that I didn't, it just wasn't really the focus at that time. So it definitely did feel like I had messed everything up because it was not in the order of checking the boxes that I had planned for myself. So yes, it's not that I didn't desire to become a mother. It was more of like, this is the wrong time to be a mother. This does not fit what I
Ooh.
was told to do with my life.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh, motherhood and the way it rips up our lives, what planned or unplanned. Ultimately, I think for the better, but that's everyone has their own experience for that. But it can be painful and shocking when it happens, whether or not you were hoping for it in that season. So, as you're talking, I'm just remembering too, like, we have a few similarities in our story and just hearing your heart. And I'm like taken back to like when we first connected, how it just felt like even though we've never met in person and we're like newer friends, I just felt this bond with you. I just feel like we're similar
Mhm.
souls in a way. So I just wanted to share that if you're listening. And I just know the more you share, the more people are gonna get to know you more deeply. But um, yeah, I just was taken back to that initial connection and
Mhm. I remember it very similarly. So yes,
yeah.
felt on this end
Like
too.
I never have had an older sibling. I'm the oldest, but I'm like I feel like Monica is like my big sister or something.
Mhm.
This really wise mentor sister that I never had, you know? So I know that it's hard to be like surface for both of us. I'm like, all right,
Mhm. This has
let's
been challenging.
it's challenging to be like, and the weather is this. No, everything's this way. So let's move into part two. Let's pull back the mask of like what we've heard about your life. And I wanted to just touch back into that very first question I asked you and see if any parts of what you shared when we spoke about, if someone was looking at your life, kind of following you around, what would they observe? And what would
Mhm.
they notice about you or your life that what parts of that do you feel called to speak to that they would have gotten wrong? Does that question make sense?
Yes, definitely.
A lot. Are
Um,
there any things that pop up? They're like, they would have gotten this wrong, and I want to talk about it.
yes. Yeah, I could even feel the energy rising in me to like clarify the feelings of misunderstanding that come up a lot for me. Feels like that's one of my wounds is like, don't you dare project your assumptions onto me about how you think my life has always been. So it was very hard not to mention those earlier, but
Yes.
yeah, feeling misunderstood has definitely been a work in progress for me. So yeah, the first thing that comes up is like the financial abundance that I have now that um, I must not know what it's like to have it any other way. And as I shared about my childhood, that's just not the case. I mean, um, I also have had to work really hard to get to where I am, and I think there's a lot of assumption of that, like I said, that's always been this way. And what's true though is that from a very young age, I started working and making my own money and have paid for my own life pretty much since I was a young teenager.
It wasn't
I
just handed to you on a silver platter. Like,
No, no. I paid for all of my higher education completely on my own as well. I had to pay for my own car, my own insurance, my own gas. Definitely, if I wanted any type of clothes that weren't purchased from either like a garage sale or Walmart, that was, expected for me to
Mhm.
pay for. So that's one thing. Another thing would be the assumption that I'm a therapist. I did go back to school and get a master's in clinical social work, and work similarly to a therapist, but I chose not to get licensed at the end of my program. And part of the reason for that was I knew I was going to be working with people in a way that would make my heart swell. And I knew that that couldn't happen in the system that is traditional mental health, that I would be working with people in a way that got to the root of their pain and suffering. And so I went a little rogue, let's say.
Oh.
And some of the things that I do I can't talk super freely about because of, legality issues. And so I think that put together, like Monica's prim and proper and operating above ground, is one of my favorite, like, dark little secrets, is that I'm actually doing almost all of the work I do underground.
Mhm.
And I do have a deep desire to bring some of it above ground, but right now legality issues keep me from doing that. So yeah, it's almost like I have this little secret career that
Yeah.
people only, if a certain number of people know about. And
Mhm.
so yeah,
Cool.
that's a couple of things that come to mind right away.
Yes. Okay, really quick questions about each of them that I would just love
Mhm,
to hear your take on. When
mhm,
you mentioned the financial aspect of things and how, I mean, you literally paid for education, car, all of that. Now that you're a mother,
mhm.
I was curious your take on just personally on like what do you think is appropriate of like I could see some beauty in like making your kids work to earn the car
Mhm.
versus just handing it to them. But I'm curious, like, where do you stand now having that background and then being in a more
Yeah,
financially abundant place, but then raising your kids? Did you do it the same?
I love that question. I find that extremes are not typically the best way to navigate motherhood. And so I have found a beautiful place in the middle where I want my children to know that I support them and they are not alone in the world. And so I've always asked them to meet me halfway and to pay for half. And
Mm.
so that does dictate what type of car they're able to afford. I'm not the one buying their kids brand new fancy cars. We're finding, and I see it as like a life skill of like being resourceful and finding used cars that are practical and safe and all those things. But yeah, I have a meet them halfway philosophy when it comes to parenting. I also want to mention, this is really important to me, that each of my children have needed very different models for that. As in, my
Oh.
daughter was very independent and work money making oriented, focused less on friends and school and sports, and so she just had a lot of time and energy to put into that. And so my expectations of her were different than my son, who has he has a really bustling social life. He plays soccer almost year round. And so my expectation of him to pay up front was unrealistic. So my daughter had already saved all this money. And so we just paid for it at the same time. So um, knowing that our children are so beautifully, uniquely different and have different needs, and not cookie cuttering motherhood for each of them has been a huge. It's like I knew I was going to need to do that, but I've had so many opportunities to practice it because my children are so polar opposite different when it comes to their personalities, and their inner drive is so different. What excites them is different. And just navigating that with as much fairness, but also flexibility has been really important to me.
I love that customization. Work where like I don't know if it's created rivalries in the two children. Like we're like
No,
you did it this way with one, but the really seeing them and meeting them where they're at. And in a way it is equitable, but you're meeting them in their unique personality and lifestyle and all of that too. So,
yeah. So much of my parenting has been transparency oriented. So
Mm.
it has not created that dynamic of competition, or what you used a
Yeah.
word. I kind of want to go back to it. What was it?
Rivalry? Was
Yeah, rivalry. Yeah.
that
It's
tension of
actually,
siblings? Like, you did it this way for this person. Why didn't you do that for me? I'm
yeah.
noticing that with my toddler and 5-year-old now. Like,
Yes, I can absolutely see where that could have happened if I hadn't been open and transparent about the whys behind why I do things
mm,
with them. And so that actually brings me back to like a huge mothering lesson for me, was what drove me honestly to a near point of insanity. We maybe come back to that, was when my parents would tell me, because I said so. Um, do as I say, not as I do type of energy, right? And so I have always been as open and honest and transparent with my kids, age appropriate, of course, in how I'm, leading them through life. And so I do see that my daughter, who did end up, paying for her car differently than my son, could very much be frustrated with that. But she has shared with me, she's like, no, I totally get it. He has a completely different, life experience than I do. And it just doesn't make sense for him to do it that way. And that was just like one of those moments where you're like, oh, when your kids can offer you a little reassurance that, it can feel hard and confusing at times. And to actually get it from a grown, 20-year-old daughter at this point, that she understands why I'm doing it differently, feels really rewarding.
mm, so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love where that question like took us. I'm like, I just was curious, and you had so much wisdom to share there. Yeah, and I couldn't help but think about over the last 5 years as I've started to just be around more moms in my mothering journey. I've met quite a few mothers who take a similar stance with transparency, or fathers
Mhm.
just in their way they approach parenting. And that was definitely not the way things happened with us. It was very much like everything was behind closed doors. There was almost like that Wizard of Oz, like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm curious,
Mhm.
whispering and tension. And my parents didn't know that they could do it a different way, and they certainly probably thought they were more transparent than their parents, that generation. But I have boomer
And they
parents.
probably were, right? They probably
Probably
were.
were. Yeah, but it very much felt like they were this hierarchy, and whatever, all the thoughts. But I'm just so personally drawn to the idea of like inviting our children more into the decision-making process and being more
Mhm.
open and real with them, age appropriate, wise, of course. So
Yeah.
figuring it out still, and like how we want to do it. But I personally think that's a beautiful way to parent. And yeah, I
And
try.
what comes to me as you're saying that too is being really clear on what your family's values are. Like, naming them and talking about them with your children when they're young. So in our family, it's very important we treat everyone with kindness and respect, or things like that, so that you are um, clear. Everyone's clear and on the same page about what family values are, and letting them have their input about what's important to them too. So.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Mm, so many ideas and things from. So the other question that I had for you, when you talked about, oh, they would get wrong that, I'm a therapist, while you have that degree, that foundation and skill set, that's not quite what you do. Your work in the world looks a little different and is more underground. I'm curious if you have received any pushback from colleagues in the industry or people that, because you've done it differently, or
Yeah.
has it been more private to where people just don't know?
There's been a mix, I'd say, especially early on when I was realizing I was going to be taking like a deviation from the norm, which the norm that I am referring to is like um, medication and talk therapy being the only path for people who graduated from the program I did and had intentions of working in a therapist-like setting. And so I feel like the most pushback I got, which is going to open up a whole can of worms of my own story for sure, is being judged as someone who was uh, medication shaming, actually. And that was, I remember, just a really challenging place for me to have to navigate, because that's not at all what I was doing. I personally had been on an antidepressant for 20 years of my life.
Hmm.
Um, And so I had definitely gotten to a point where I was like, shame is not the way to get anyone to move forward with, healing work. So shame was never what my intention was around just an alternate path. But it's hard when that's the only way some people could see it. And so it was a really painful part of my story was, um, because I didn't follow this path, they assumed that I thought that it was the wrong one.
Mhm.
And I just don't see it that way at all. I just knew in my bones there was a different way to support people. Um, and this is going to sound kind of, you know, odd maybe, but the thing that actually like had a light bulb moment for me was when we learned about the ethics of like clinical social work and not being able to like front hug or tell a client, like meet a client right where they are and share tears with them and hug them and even like express how deeply I care for them. And to me, that I knew that people needed safe places where they could feel seen, and I could offer some of my own lived experience, because that's another, therapeutic no-no, is to be kind of a blank slate for someone. And I understand the value in that. I am not diminishing that. There is some value in that, but I just know personally, I've never been able to deeply connect and heal with a blank slate. So the humanness and the real connection that I wanted to be able to offer clients was kind of frowned upon by that paradigm.
Mm.
And so that's been a big part of why it all makes a lot of sense. Now, I actually tapered off the antidepressant I had been on for approximately 20 years, the last semester of my graduate program.
Oh.
Don't recommend it. I now have beautiful earth medicines that can help people through that process with so much more ease than I had available to me. And that's a big part of why I'm so passionate about what I do, is that there are ways to support our body through coming off of medication when people feel confident and ready to do so.
Yeah.
I offer them that support. I offer them, um, yeah, natural medicines that support their body as they're doing that. But I didn't have that available to me, and I definitely struggled more than I see my current clients struggling with that process.
Mm.
So, but yeah, back to your original question. Remind me so that I can feel back into the.
Was it around? I just, as you were talking, I had, other thoughts flowing.
I was gonna
Was it
say so much came through all at once,
Yes,
so I can't even
yes.
remember.
Well, I know I asked you about like, what would people have gotten wrong, and you
Hmm.
about the misperceptions that maybe
Yeah,
colleagues had in the industry, or if you had any pushback. And I
yeah,
believe that was the last one that kind of led to
yeah.
that. But I couldn't also help but notice that misunderstanding wound that you mentioned at the beginning, how like that
Hmm.
totally came up in this,
Yes.
how when we don't understand something, um, whether or not it's related to this or not, we just can feel as a human species so threatened. Like
Hmm.
when something's different than the norm,
Yes.
often our first response is to feel threatened and then to like, um, you know, push back on that person versus
Yes.
seeking to
Yeah.
understand. And that's part of the heart of the podcast, to be honest, because you can see Monica's life story or hear about her view on politics, but until you actually pull back the curtain and seek to understand a person, you're living in this like ego vibe. And
Hmm.
we just need so much less of that in the world. And we're genuinely seeking more human connection that's raw and real. And we all want to be seen and understood more. And so I'm just grateful that this like naturally showed up in the podcast through your story.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of my most painful moments through my life have been the fuel that are like feeding me now to serve people differently. So the way I was, treated in a involuntary inpatient mental health stay has been fuel for me to feel so committed to knowing we can do better for people.
Mm.
I just, yeah, can feel how those painful moments, and even the misunderstandings, because it has shown me the way people, myself included, can respond or react um, when they are just making assumptions or not understanding what's actually happening. So
Mm. Yep. Just think we need more seeking to understand energy happening in the world. So,
curiosity over judgment, I use that one a
yes.
lot.
I love that. I love that. It's like it would just change so much if we viewed our children that way, our partners, our bosses, people
Yeah,
with different political backgrounds, like that
yeah,
divide. It's like the divide in the black and white polarized views is just so extreme and so painful and disruptive to our well-being. So,
yes.
yeah, more of that energy, please.
Yeah, I like to say too that, like, if you ask enough questions of someone, if you get curious enough, you will understand exactly why they believe the way they do and what has led them to this like place of believing. So curiosity for me is a top value, honestly, in my life. Curiosity is, yeah, a guiding compass for me too.
That's so beautiful.
Thank
I'm inspired to be more curious now. Like truly,
you.
truly. Um, and just the topic of using our pain, like letting that pain fuel
Mhm.
really meaningful endeavor in our lives, whether it's related to our work in the world or just how we decide to show up or
Yeah,
a volunteer group that we care for because of XYZ. Um, the truth is no one in life escapes without some sort of major pain point
yes.
or multiples. And this is just a reminder to us all that you have two choices. We can let the pain shape and mold us into like a hardened person that puts out, anger and pain into the world, or
Mhm.
or literally it's just I only see it two ways, or we can let that really fuel a movement of beauty and joy and like helping others feel less alone. And it's so interesting and not surprising and beautiful how even with your own medicine journey and tapering and all the things that have gotten you to where you are using them. Like I see you as a force of love, capital L love in the world, and would love to hear more about anything that you were just discussing about your work in the world that you
Mhm.
want to share more about.
Okay. Yeah, so I like to I like to bring attention to the fact that so many people's journeys seem to start with like on the physical realm where we give some attention and energy and focus onto maybe like our physical bodies, whether that be physical fitness or starting to bring more awareness to some mindful eating practices. And that's really what happened for me, as what I would call like my initial awakening was to start understanding the impact and the power I had over being able to influence my physical body with what I did, input output type of thing, right? And it is my belief that you spend enough time focused on physical, you're going to start getting curious about the emotional aspect of it. You'll be like, but why do I like getting curious back to that, right?
Yep.
Why do I emotionally eat? Like, what is going on there? Just getting curious about the connection to the emotional world. And it's also my belief that if you spend enough time getting really curious about emotions and how thoughts are connected to emotions, um, really powerful work. I love it. And I still feel like there's more depth that you spend enough time in that realm, you're going to start getting curious about what's beyond, as in energetic or spiritual curiosities. And so that has been my personal journey is, moving from focusing on physical 3D, um, aspects to understanding um, the emotional realm, emotional maturity, and things like that. And then that exploration took me deep into, expanding my beliefs about my spirituality. And so that's been a huge part of my journey, is supporting others who are curious about big picture questions in life, like what are we doing here? Like we
Yep.
are floating through space on this, big blue rock. What
Wow.
in the world are we doing here? We're, floating through space on this big rock, and like, what's the point? What are we really here doing? Is this all there is? Questions like that, like what happens when we die? Big questions that I've had since I was little, and didn't feel like I got a lot of clear answers that satisfied my curiosity. And so the last, I would say, 5 or so years, 6 maybe years, I have been diving deeper into my own spiritual practices and beliefs. And I find that the more we think we know, the less we know. And so it just is this continued curiosity.
Yep.
But what I love supporting people with is um, through a couple of different systems. And some of your folks may have heard of human design and gene keys. I use both of those systems to um, as a framework to help people start exploring some of those big questions. Self-discovery, life purpose, and shadow work are kind of the areas that I find those systems that are rooted in astrology, the ancient I Ching, the Kabbalah. Like there's so many bodies of wisdom. There's ties to Christianity, there are ties to Buddhism, and all of the texts of the Gene Keys too. So I feel like it's inclusive in many ways, but also people who are really committed to their religious practices can also find lots and lots of support and wisdom in this. So I support people that have all kinds of religious background and current practices. And yeah, that's one aspect of the work I do, is diving in one-on-one with people who are ready to start trying to find some answers to big questions. And then I work with people who are ready to come off of antidepressants and ADHD meds as well, using the support of some earth medicines. And yeah, when people are ready for a transformative experience, I support them through journey medicine as well. So
How did you, if you're comfortable with talking about it, I'm curious. I know that you tapered yourself after 20 years. Like, walk with me, if you're open to it, with like how you started to help others with tapering and like incorporating things.
yeah. So I sometimes laugh about how I spent tens of thousands of dollars on a master's program education to only have to figure all this stuff out on my own afterwards. So much of what I do has been self-study. Um, Ironically, I have a book right here next to me that has been a huge help. It's called Your Drug May Be Your Problem.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I've heard that.
yeah.
The
How
drug.
and why to stop taking psychiatric medication. So it's, your drug may be your problem. Your drug you're taking may actually be causing some of the symptoms you think it's helping with. If that just plants a seed for someone, that's beautiful. If the medication you're taking now is supporting you and helping you, beautiful. I am happy when people find um, that that's working for them. But the honest truth is there's so many people that are still struggling and still suffering while taking medication. And that's really who I'm speaking to, is people who just know there has to be something better available to me. There has to be something that will truly help. And what I find is doing that, like big picture, big question, life purpose work is often a missing piece of the puzzle for people, that they feel purposelessness in a way that kind of is this cloud that they sometimes don't even know is over them, right? So we're diving into that and getting support from earth medicine. And yeah, it's a beautiful combination.
Hmm. Amazing. My heart's just warm hearing about that. Yeah. Are there any parts of what you've done, I don't even know, the last, what, 10 years or so? Longer? How long has it been that you've been working in that way?
So
With,
about 6 years.
or so, yeah, 5 or 6 years ago.
Mhm.
Are there any like themes or moments that stand out to you that have just been really validating, like this is this is why I do this, or just like, yeah, or transformational themes that you're like stand out that you'd want to share?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind actually is connected to a book I'm reading about complex PTSD
Hmm,
and understanding that I'm willing to say nearly all. I know I might get some backlash from this, but
of course.
nearly all mental health diagnoses and illnesses and struggles are connected to complex trauma from
Hmm,
childhood. And having language for that for myself has been deeply healing. And supportive to my own journey. And I feel like I can support people so much better when I see through the lens of like what essential needs um, were not met through your childhood, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, all of them. Um, Neglect having a huge impact, emotional neglect having a huge impact. Um, So yeah, being able to have some context and language for what's really going on feels like one of the things that's just been transformative for the work I do, and also just seeing people's success stories of um, going through an experience with me and having come out on the other side with just a completely renewed way of seeing life, um,
hmm.
having connected with their soul mission in a way that um, life doesn't feel so heavy and hard anymore.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, I have such incredible transformation stories of the people I work with that it is another source of fuel for me to keep going, of just seeing the impact that it's making in people's lives to align with their work in the world and to have the energy to do it. Honestly, that's a big part of it, is that depressive energy.
Yep.
Um, can feel so heavy that you can't even imagine doing basic life things through the day. How could I possibly be living out my highest purpose in this life?
Totally.
So,
They're not
yeah,
able to see their lives or themselves clearly. And it's like you have to get that constrictive, I want to do like a chokehold, like that energy out of the way in order
yeah.
to help shift them. And
Yes, and it's important that I meet people exactly where they are in their journey. It's very, very important to me, and something I can take away from that um, expensive degree that I got is that was really drilled into us, is meeting people where they're at, because I'll never be able to reach someone if I try to, yeah, bring them meet them somewhere where they can't even see the above that yet. So, yeah, and I feel like that's a gift of mine, is because of my own like lived experience of, I mean, honestly, I would say I identified as someone who is depressed most of my life until I actually tapered off that antidepressant.
yeah.
That's when things started opening up to me. I started to understand what people meant by intuition. I had been so disconnected from it, so disconnected from my full range of emotional experiences too. Yes, I might not have been suicidal depressed, but I also had never touched joy really. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of just this like getting by. Um, and I wasn't given a lot of hope that would ever get better. And that's truly like a big part of what I do, is I want to be an example of what's possible and inspiration to others who feel like so stuck where they are right now that it couldn't possibly get better. Like that's a really big part of my mission, is to just be a beaming example of like, I used to be so depressed and so stuck in the day-to-day grind of things, and now I'm living like my truly like my best life,
Hmm.
doing what I love.
Hmm.
momming it up in a way that I didn't even think was possible, to be at a place where my kids are so open and freely share their lives with me. And I think that goes back to that transparency of um, just being willing to hear anything they bring to me without judgment.
Yeah.
I'd say that's one of my favorite mom tips to share with people is, can you put your own wounding, your own reactions, your own judgments aside and just be a landing
Mm.
spot for your children to have whatever experience they're having, and not need to fix it either necessarily, because we can go into fixer mode really easily, but to just give them a place to express and to land and to be.
Mm. Without an agenda, without putting our judgments on it or our own trauma, like you said, or without trying to fix it. Like it's almost like so simple. It's hard though. Because how
Yes.
often do we jump in, especially as women, we want to fix it and do, well, men too, I know. But what a gift. Like when people listening are like, how often do you talk to someone that literally is just holding pure space without any other, they're not trying to give you their opinion or be like,
Mhm.
oh, I had that happen to me too. They're just literally holding space for you.
Yeah.
What an opportunity for our parenting to practice that every day. There's probably something like, you know,
Yeah.
it's,
Agreed.
yeah. There was so much that you shared that I just want to thank you for sharing. It was really, really beautiful to hear. Um, and I would really enjoy peeking a little bit more at your mothering story and asking you
Mhm.
this question. Um, you know, if people, if someone really knew you, Monica, what would they know about your mothering journey? If like we really knew you, what would we know?
Oh, let me be with that one for just a moment.
Take your time.
Yeah, I'm hearing commitment, like just this commitment to being the mother that each of my children need to be, me to be. Um, and knowing that shifts with stages and phases of life, knowing that the level of care that they need when they're younger actually feels smothering to them when they're older. And
Mm,
to not take that personally, because it is a beautiful, natural, developmentally appropriate response is for them to start individuating, to let them have their own lived experience without our interference. It's like I can be there to be their biggest support. Sometimes that looks like words and sometimes that looks like presence. I'm here. So it's not always the same. And receiving feedback from them graciously, asking for feedback. That would be something like, you
oh,
know, asking them like, how can I better support you through this? One of my favorite questions. And sometimes it's literally like, I just need you to leave me alone for a while. And if you can actually walk away from that and breathe through the discomfort.
not take it personally. Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's a hard one.
Yeah. Um, because one of our family values is respect for all people, they know that when they've crossed the line of disrespect, and I can be patient and wait for them to come to me and apologize. That's another little beautiful parenting children piece of the puzzle for me, has been I will model repair for them when I have stepped out of my integrity. So they know exactly what that looks like when when repair is needed. And so it is not uncommon for them to take a day or two though. Which means I'm breathing through a lot of like, oh, um, but still knowing that, um, yeah, I've raised them in a way where I'm modeling the behavior that I want to,
Mhm.
help them cultivate in their life for life skills moving forward. as opposed to what we were modeled, where it was, for me, it was a lot of like, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, you literally would say that to me.
So hypocritical. It's really sad. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm guilty at times too. Just saying that to all.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. I
that was
just,
the
no
norm, you know.
perfection here. Yeah.
Yeah.
No perfection here. But owning it,
Mhm.
honestly, is a
Owning
big part of it.
that humility is
Yeah,
goes so far with our
it
kids.
does.
Like I
It
know I
really,
was yelling at you to stop yelling, and that was actually really wrong, and mommy needs to check herself too. You know, like that piece feels key in the repair.
yeah.
And
Yes,
it,
I'm practicing. I'm working on this. It's something I'm working on. It shows them that there's skills that we can develop, that behaviors are skills that we can hone. Um,
mm,
yeah,
hmm.
let's see if there's anything else there around. Yeah, that word commitment just feels so committed to helping them become who they came here to be, too, and not any version that looks like what I desire for them. Feel really deeply committed to that. Um, I get challenged on that a lot because I have, of course, children that are mirroring like opposites of how I was raised, of, you know, challenging school system type of behaviors with my son, who is not getting straight A's. He's very smart and doesn't think he should have to do any work that doesn't make sense to him.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
I'm learning how to support that.
Mm.
Keeping a zoomed out lens is what I would say around big picture. Does it really matter if he does this homework assignment or not? Talk
Ooh.
about challenging some of my, like,
High
I can't,
achieving books,
oh
like,
my gosh,
you
I
know,
can't
schoolgirl.
imagine not doing
Straight
my
A's.
homework.
Right. Oh yeah.
But do you want to hear what he has managed to hone some negotiation skills with his teachers? At 16 years old, he's negotiating with teachers on, if I get at least this grade on the test, will you waive basically all my homework, and learning skills that I didn't cultivate until much later in adulthood. So he has a lot to teach me. His favorite question to ask me is always, Mom, why do you care? Like, oh gosh, why do I care so much about things that just aren't that important?
Oh.
I mean, that's actually another little piece I'd love to share too, is that seeing our children as our greatest teachers, that they are
Took the words
here
out of my
to
mouth. Yeah.
literally, yeah, help us grow and evolve in this lifetime, that they chose us for a reason. And one of the reasons was to have an experience with us that supports both directions. I see it, we're here to
Mm.
guide and support them, and they're here to show us where we still need love and healing for parts of ourselves. So,
Oh my goodness. That was actually like the next question I was going to ask you was about like the way it's not a way that I would say everyone views motherhood, but it's a lens that I would love to present more in the world of viewing motherhood as the portal to your greatest transformation. So much of what I was fed before becoming a mother that was like unexpected, I just was very similar to you, like, I don't know, it's just really not interested. It's not on my plan. I have other life goals. But it happened. Was that I would like lose my life, my freedom, everything would
mhm,
just go downhill with motherhood. And through the experience of motherhood, I've had to die many deaths. Um,
mhm,
and but have realized that like my most vibrant, authentic self
mhm,
is available to me through motherhood when I surrender to what it's here to teach me. My most painful, ugly self is also available when I resist what motherhood is here to teach me. So
that was
I
good.
was, it's been a journey, folks, but I was like curious to hear, and it kind of segued into that and the way your children are your teachers, because I very much align with that. Like my spiritual practice is parenting. Oh my,
Yeah,
there's other spirits, but like my big one is parenting.
yeah.
In my agenda, opening my heart every single day. And so I was going to ask you about, you know, your any of the transformations that you've had to undergo as a result of parenting, knowing that you have probably had that similar philosophy of like, it is here to transform me versus I'm just gonna go through the motions. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, I do,
conveyor belt
definitely.
parenting, not connected, heart
Yeah,
centered. Like,
that's yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is how quickly it forced me to grow up at 21 years old. Like, so I find out I'm pregnant at 21, and I was living pretty much a pretty fun party lifestyle. Um, and I think a lot about like if I hadn't gotten pregnant, what might have become of my lifestyle? Would it have
yeah.
really like taken me down this like really detrimental to my physical, mental, emotional health? Like would have, just gone down the toilet? Possibly. Who knows, right? But I do think about how it taught me very quickly the the value in shifting from a self-centered view of life into an other-centered, into a
Mm.
being in service to others. And so, yeah, I'm deeply grateful to my daughter for appearing when she did, because I do feel like um, who knows what I would have ended up, what path I would have ended up on. Um, yeah, I also think about how it shifted the way goodness, it's so hard to put words to something so
Oh,
profound sometimes, right? Like, I do think of it as like this initiation, right? This portal into a whole new way of seeing the world when there is a part of you that is now outside of you. Like,
oh.
when you have
Yeah.
part of your heart, I know this is not an uncommon saying, of like feeling what it feels like to have your heart walking around outside of your body, just brings a whole different perspective to the way you see the world, and challenging at times for sure, and also deeply rewarding. So, yeah.
That was a treat to hear. Form. I just love conversations around this as it relates to motherhood and just that invitation to view it in a different way for our good and of humanity.
Yeah,
Um, I would love to ask you another question as we wrap
sure.
and take all the time you need with this one. But if you could just check in and be like, is there a message that your heart wants to share with mothers, just present day mamas?
Hmm.
What what would you want to tell them? What would you want them to know?
Oh, yeah. It's back to that initiation um, energy, where accepting this birth and death cycle that like is ever present in motherhood. It's accepting that there is a aspect of you that does die when a child is born, and trusting that every every death has a birth, and that there is a version of you on the other side that is so much stronger and wiser than you can even imagine. That if you can see it through the lens of, um, yeah, of them just being an opportunity for you to grow in this lifetime, to love deeper than you may have ever thought possible.
Mm.
It's a message of acceptance. So much of our suffering is denying the reality of what is, and so finding a way to accept that the only constant in life is change. That the phases that you're in now will not be the phases you're in, soon. that the needs that are being asked to be met um, will change and evolve, and you will adapt and grow.
Mm.
Yeah, and that it is hard. Like it's like owning, accepting that, right? Like
Yeah.
people who want to try to paint this picture that it's all rainbows and butterflies is so sad to me because it just denies such a big, um, just, yeah, half of life.
Yep.
There's the dark and the light, and it's not losing ourselves in the dark because we're sure there's light on the other side.
Mm. Mm. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Poetry. It was poetry. Oh, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I wish I could go on and on. Maybe another one again. I know we'll talk again, but about motherhood and life. If anyone listening, Monica, would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
So I've gone a bit on a social media hiatus, but you can find me on Facebook still. My name is Monica Whitmore, and I'm sure we'll link right with a Facebook link. You're welcome to direct message me there on Messenger. I'm happy to respond that way. If the conversation goes to the underground, if you will, wink, wink, we'll take it to text. And um, yeah, I welcome people to reach out if there's some part of my story resonates with you, or if you have questions about anything I've said today. If you come to me with curiosity, I will meet you. I will meet you there with my heart wide open. So just know that I welcome that, and hope that this that offers hope and inspiration and, yeah, a little peace too, hopefully.
Hmm. It was a true joy to chat with you. I can't thank you enough for sharing your heart and some badass wisdom with the moms. I personally appreciate it, and I can't help but think that what you shared from your journey, from your struggles, from even just your background in therapy and what you do now in motherhood is going to bless the people watching. Thank
Thank
you
you, Beth.
for being you and being on here. Um, for my listeners, I am just starting something new that I wanted to tell you. So, currently, if you notice with YouTube, we don't have comments on it just to protect, how social media can be like bashy. But I would love a place to converse about these beautiful conversations where if you want to share the ways it hit you or open a dialogue, that there's a place we can do that. So I have created a WhatsApp community. I will share the link below in the comments section. And if this podcast episode touched you in any way or you can relate to it, I would love for you to join us and share and connect in that podcast community on WhatsApp. So I'll share it in the comments below. And again, a huge thank you to you, Monica, for being here. So much love to you and to the mamas watching. Mwah.
Thank you.